So welcome to sunny Italy for this video blog about the Alfa Romeo Giulia Veloce. What is a Giulia Veloce? Well, if you take your basic Giulia, which is 4-cylinder, 2-litre petrol, 2.2 diesel, you add a new front end and a 280 horsepower version of that 4-cylinder petrol, you get a Veloce. Now this is really a stepping stone to the Quadrifoglio that really we'd all love to own, but at 60 grand or about 70 odd once you've added a few tasty bits like the ceramic brakes and the carbon backed seats, presents a rather more serious proposition. Now this, as you see it, would cost you about 37,935, so that's about half the price of a Giulia Quadrifoglio. If it offers even half the drive, it's going to be a bit of a steal. Now, what else do you get? Well, you get an 8-speed automatic like the rest of the Giulia range. In Italy, this car has the Q4 four-wheel drive system. In the UK, it will be rear-wheel drive, which I think is good news. What else might you get for the money? Well, for about a grand or so less, you could either have a BMW 330i or a Jaguar XE. They're probably at the kind of similar kind of sporty end of the spectrum that the Giulia is operating in. They have about 250 horsepower apiece, so they're slightly down on power. That's instant advantage to Alfa Romeo there. They're obviously very well established products, very appealing in their own right, but Alfa Romeo brings to the sector a new level of sexiness. Yes, of course, we can't talk about Italian cars without getting all romantic, can we? There are certain stereotypes to hit. What else do we get on the Veloce that marks it out from a standard Giulia? Well, these exhausts are a bit different, a bit fancier, maybe a hint of Quadrifoglio in the looks. The wheels here are Quadrifoglio wheels, but there is a standard turbine wheel which sets it apart from the rest of the range. It's obviously a really, really handsome car. Let's hope it goes well too. So here we are in the Giulia Veloce. What's it like? Well, I guess the question to ask is this the poor man's Giulia Quadrifoglio or the thinking man's Giulia? You know, offering you a bit more performance at a vaguely sensible price with kind of real world running costs and all that kind of thing. Sorry to bring that into the equation, but you know, I guess we have to think like that, don't we? Well, it's got all the stuff that's really rather nice about the Giulia. It looks fabulous, I think. It's got a really lovely interior, although there are some slightly iffy, cheap plastics where you interact with the car a lot. This shifter is particularly horrible, I have to say. Quite disappointing really when they've got the style right and so many of the fundamentals, and then something that you touch all the time when you're driving the car. You know, every time you start it up, every time you manoeuvre, you grip that and you think, oh, that's horrible. But fundamentally, the Giulia is a really sound car. Visibility is really good out of it. It's got a nice size. It feels light on its feet, which is good. Now, this being an Italian market Veloce, it's four-wheel drive, unlike the ones we'll get in the UK, which will be rear-wheel drive. Now, I'll talk a bit about the Q4 system. It's a bit like the systems used by Jaguar and others. It's rear-wheel drive most of the time, and then it'll direct a bit of up to 60% of the torque to the front wheels if you need it. I've got to say, it does seem a fairly nice compromise because you still get that manoeuvrability and the lack of corruption to the steering that you'd get from a rear-wheel drive car, but I guess if you're up here in the mountains and it was a bit wet and slimy, you've got a bit more security should you need it. But I think all Giulias have that benefit from being rear-wheel drive, even if, and this is a bit frustrating, you still can't turn everything off, or you don't even get a midway setting where you can get a bit more of that rear-wheel drive feeling. Now I know this sounds like motoring hack nonsense, and you know, we make out like we drive everywhere on the lock stops, which we don't. But when you can get a sport ESP setting on a Volvo XC90, it does seem rather odd that Alfa Romeo won't give it to you on a car called Veloce, but there we go. Such is the way of these things. Now then, the feel of this car is important, and Alfa Romeo has to deliver on that kind of sporting heritage. I really like it. The little details, although I said that shifter's horrible, these big aluminium paddles are lovely. So they really give you, if I put it into manual mode, they give you a real sense of you being in an Italian sporting car. You even got double pedals for neutral, which is quite nice. Now I've just progressed up through the modes. We've got that DNA switch there, so I'm now in the dynamic setting. You can hear a bit more of that engine. The gear shifts get a bit punchier. It selects a firmer damper setting, which actually isn't very nice. And like the Quadrifoglio, you can stay in dynamic mode but switch it back to soft dampers. And I think that's really the nicest all-round package. And it's a car with really nice flow about it. And I think with 280 horsepower, it's just got a nice level of performance. It's not going to blow your socks off, but it's just got a bit more get up and go compared with the standard Giulias. And let's face it, given that the petrol version has just 200 horsepower, that is welcome. So I have to say, it's not a particularly nice sounding engine. It's like many sort of modern direct injection turbo petrol engines. It's actually got quite a diesely sound to it and quite a diesely power delivery as well. It's all the torque comes in low in the rev range. It's a little bit smoother and more refined than the diesel, but perhaps not as much as you would hope. There is a diesel version of this car coming as well, but I think, given the way things are going, I think probably the petrol would be the one to go for. I don't think I'd like to drive a Alfa Romeo Veloce with a diesel engine. I don't think that would be quite right, would it? So, overall, I think this is a really nice package. It costs about half as much as a well-spec'd Quadrifoglio, but it's definitely not half the car.